Well, good morning, and welcome to today's Energy Subcommittee hearing titled Supercomputing and American Technology Leadership. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the subcommittee at any time. Without objection, the chair authorizes the participation of Mr. Lipinski, Mr. Swalwell, Mr. Grayson, Ms. Esty, Mr. Vesey, and Ms. Clark for today's hearing, and I understand Ranking Member Johnson will serve as the ranking minority member today and give an opening statement a little later. In front of you are packets containing the written testimonies, biographies, and truth in testimony disclosures for today's witnesses. And I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. At the outset, let me say that this is my first committee hearing as a chairman of this subcommittee, and it's truly an honor to be selected to serve in this capacity. And I want to say a personal thanks to Chairman Lamar Smith for his help and his guidance. He's been just a stalwart friend of mine. I really appreciate that. This committee will tackle a number of important issues related to America's competitiveness and energy future, and I'm excited to be part of these important discussions. Today we're going to hear from a distinguished panel of witnesses about the importance of high-performance computing to American technological competitiveness, specifically focusing on the Department of Energy's Advanced Scientific Computing Research Program, also known as the OSCAR program within the Office of Science. High-performance computing provides a platform for breakthroughs in all scientific research and accelerates applications of scientific breakthroughs across our economy. Progress in computing has paved the way for breakthroughs in medical imaging, genetics research, manufacturing, engineering, and weapons development. Faster computing speeds have revolutionized the energy sector, improving the efficiency of energy production and aiding in distribution technologies. Advances in modeling and algorithm development offer opportunities for scientific discovery in fields where experiments are too difficult, too costly, or too dangerous to conduct. They are reducing costs and opening the door to more innovative discoveries. The work underway in the OSCAR program drives breakthroughs in high-performance computing. The Department of Energy's national labs host world-class computational science facilities, and the department funds the applied mathematical and computational science research that will drive the next stage of advancement in this field. As we face the reality of ongoing budget constraints in Washington, it is our job in Congress to ensure that taxpayer dollars are spent wisely on innovative research that is in the best national interest and provides the best chance for broad impact and long-term success. The basic research conducted within the OSCAR program clearly meets this requirement. High-performance computing can lead to scientific discoveries, economic growth, and will help maintain America's leadership in science and technology. I want to thank the witnesses in advance for participating in today's hearing and look forward to further discussion. I now recognize Ranking Member Johnson for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I thank you for holding this hearing. And I want to thank our very excellent panel of witnesses for their testimony and being here today. America has historically been a leader in advancing new energy technologies, as well as the fundamental sciences of physics, chemistry, engineering, mathematics, and computational science that support energy innovation. But our leadership in technology is challenged by the growing investments of other countries in education and research, investments that are now projected to quickly outpace our own investments here at home. High-performance computing, or supercomputing, is one area that we have led in for decades. And the U.S. currently hosts more than 45% of the 500 fastest supercomputers in the world. These computers are capable of processing vast amounts of data and mathematical equations at amazing speeds. In the past, high-performance computers were needed primarily for specialized scientific and engineering applications. Now, as we enter the world of big data, where thousands of devices all around us are generating millions of bytes of data to be analyzed, high-performance computing is needed not just by scientists and government researchers, but by many civic and commercial enterprises as well. Public policies play a critical role in supporting the advancement of high-performance computing and in enabling our society and economy to directly benefit from this capability. Our policies allow researchers and private industry to access the Department of Energy's computing system, which is some of the most powerful in the world. We set policies that support the development of the software necessary to operate and optimize the use of high-performance systems, software that is unlikely to be developed by private industry because the potential sales market is too small to support the initial research and development cost. And our policies ensure that our investments in new computer architectures are diverse and flexible enough to meet our national security needs, in addition to our research and private industry needs. Federal investments in high-performance computing open this technology up to the future development of proprietary products. They grow our technology economy, and they advance our technological leadership internationally. Now, while every witness on this panel is extremely distinguished, and I'm grateful that each of you could be here today, I hope you won't mind if I thank Dr. Augustine in particular for taking time to speak with us this morning, as he has been a great friend to this committee for well over a decade. As a former chairman of Lockheed Martin and the chair of the National Academy of Sciences committee that produced the seminal Rising Above the Gathering Storm report in 2005, he has broad and deep perspective of challenges facing our nation in research and technological innovation. That report laid the foundation for one of our committee's landmark bipartisan achievements, the America Competes Act of 2007, which we reauthorized in 2010, and I hope the next reauthorization is a top priority for the committee and this Congress. I look forward to hearing Mr. Augustine's thoughts, and indeed those of all of our witnesses, on where we need to go in scientific research and innovation to grow our economy and to improve the quality of life for all Americans. Working together, our committee has the opportunity to renew our commitment to scientific and technological leadership by our actions, and I look forward to any input our panelists have toward that goal. With that, I thank you for coming, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the lady, and if there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I would like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness, who comes with high commendations, is Mr. Norman Augustine, board member of the Bipartisan Policy Center. Mr. Augustine served as the Undersecretary of the Army and later as Acting Secretary of the Army from 1975 to 1977. Mr. Augustine also served as the President and CEO of Lockheed Martin until he retired in 1997. He has been a member of advisory boards to the Department of Homeland Security, Energy, Defense, Commerce, Transportation, and Health and Human Services, as well as NASA, Congress, and the White House. Is there any other? Are there boards that you weren't a member of, Mr. Augustine? Our second witness today, who is actually joining us by video, is Dr. Roscoe Giles, chairman of the Advanced Scientific Computing Advisory Committee at the Department of Energy and a professor at Boston University. Dr. Giles has served in a number of leadership roles in the community, including member of the board of Associated Universities Incorporated, chair of the Boston University Faculty Council, and general chair of the SC Conference in 2002. Welcome, Dr. Giles.
Welcome, Dr. Giles. Thank you.
Our next witness today is Mr. David Turek, Vice President of Technical Computing at IBM. Previously, Mr. Turek, am I saying that name correctly? Okay. Previously, Mr. Turek helped launch IBM's grid computing business and ran IBM's, Linux cluster business. He also helped lead IBM's initiative in support of the U.S. Accelerated Strategic Computing Initiative at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which I believe was in Mr. Swalwell's district. Yep. So welcome. Our final witness today is Dr. James Crowley, Executive Director at the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics. Dr. Crowley has held this position since 1995. Prior to this, he served in the Air Force for 22 years, retiring as Lieutenant Colonel. Dr. Crowley is a Fellow of the American Mathematical Society and a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. In order to allow time for discussion, please limit your testimony to 5 minutes. We ask the witnesses, and your entire statement will be made part of the written record. I now recognize Mr. Augustine for 5 minutes to present his testimony.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Weber, Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee, and thank you, Ranking Member Johnson, for all those kind words. I particularly am appreciative that this committee is going to devote some time to the topic at hand. Certainly high-performance computing is a key element of research. I will submit a statement for the record. I'd like to begin by offering a few words about the basic nature of research. It's through research that new knowledge is created that permits engineers like myself to translate that research and knowledge into products and services that working with entrepreneurs can go into the marketplace and improve people's lives. We often think of Apple, the great things it's done, deservedly think of them, iPod, iPads, and so on. But it wasn't Apple that made those things possible. It was researchers working decades ago on such things as quantum mechanics and material sciences, solid-state physics, and so on. One of the things about basic research, in particular, is that you can't know a priori what will be the outcome of it, and that I'm sure makes it particularly difficult in your roles to build support for it. Yet there are so many examples of where basic research that was curiosity-driven led to great improvements in people's lives. Three things that come to my mind. One is research on seals in Antarctica led to a surgical procedure that saved the lives of many children undergoing lung surgery. Another was study of the chemistry of butterfly wings that led to an ingredient that's used in chemotherapy. Still another, of course, would be the accidental discovery of penicillin when someone was studying research on bacteria many, many decades ago. Sir Andrew Fleming. I'd like to quickly touch on the importance of research, and I'll cite three areas where I think it's particularly had an impact. One is on the creation of jobs, and there's evidence that if you want to add 1% to the number of 1 percentage point to the number of jobs in America, you have to add about 1.7 percentage points to the GDP in America. There have been a number of studies, one of which was the basis of a Nobel Prize. It has shown that between 50 and 85% of the growth of GDP in our country during the last half century is directly attributable to advancements in two fields, science and technology. And of course, those advancements are entirely dependent upon research. Health as an example, in the last century, life expectancy in the United States grew from 47 to 79 years. Matter of fact, I'm 79 years old, so this is really important to me. The life expectancy gain that came about was in considerable part attributable to advancements in biomedical research. A third example is things that we take for granted in our everyday life, be they television, electric cars, DVDs, GPSs, CAT scans, or what have you, are dependent upon knowledge that came through basic research. Touching briefly on high-performance computing, it impacts fields across the entire technological spectrum. My own field of aerodynamics is an example. Another would be genomics, high-energy physics. It truly is of broad importance. The Department of Energy, as you know, operates 17 laboratories. They are able to do things that industry really can't do under the pressures of today's marketplace for quick returns, financial returns. The examples of things that they could do so well are high risk, high return payoff research, long-term research, large research projects. They're particularly well suited to that. And work in the past, for example, sponsored by the Department of Energy on hydraulic fracturing is, as you know, having an enormous impact today in the political world as well as the economic world. How are we doing in the United States in research? The answer has to be not very well. Research funding as a percentage of GDP, the United States has dropped from first place to seventh place in the last decade or so. The fraction of research in a country that's sponsored by the government, the United States is now in 29th place. As a fraction of R&D GDP, R&D to GDP, we're in 10th place now. In 5 years, China is very likely to pass us in research in the absolute sense and as a fraction of GDP. Finally, I would note that H.R. 5120 that was introduced last year contributes in a major way to solving what I think are some of the problems we have in translating the research that goes on in the DOE laboratories to the commercial sector. And I'd be happy to address that further should the committee wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Augustine. And now we recognize Dr. Giles.
Thank you, Chairman Weber and Ranking Member Johnson and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today, and thanks for your support of the outstanding scientific and technical activities we are here to discuss. The Advanced Scientific Computing Advisory Committee, ASCAC, which I chair, is a panel of experts that advises DOE under FACA rules about activities of the Office of Advanced Scientific Computing Research, OSCAR. My testimony is largely based on ASCAC reports. I will address the value of research supported directly and indirectly by OSCAR and also the technological challenges and rewards represented by U.S. leadership in this field. The computing needs of science have grown exponentially, paralleling the exponential increases in computer power we've seen in recent decades, sometimes pushing the computer industry for new capabilities, and sometimes finding novel ways to exploit existing technology. The combination of computing power and the ability to transport, store, and learn from vast amounts of data is critical to U.S. leadership in a wide range of scientific and technical fields. OSCAR has enabled DOE scientists to harness unprecedented computing power to better understand the physical world, design new materials and devices, and engineer new and improved methods for energy production, utilization, and distribution. Recent examples include microscopic modeling of nuclear reactor core startup that can improve reactor efficiency and safety, simulations of complex combustion, linking the chemistry and physics of fluids and gases to the observed behavior of engines and reactors, predictive modeling of materials for lithium-air battery systems, potentially able to store 10 times as much energy as lithium-ion batteries. Wheat genome sequencing, previously impossible to do, is now possible in under 32 seconds using new programming methods developed by OSCAR. And modeling the surface of human skin to understand its properties and how chemicals might affect it. My written testimony includes many additional examples. OSCAR enables such outcomes by designing and deploying an effective system of world-class facilities for computing, data science, and networking in DOE labs, making available expert staff to work with scientists to push the envelope of applications, and supporting research in computer science and applied mathematics, leading to key advances in software, hardware, algorithms, and applications. Success also depends on a knowledgeable workforce and an educational pipeline to create that workforce. OSCAR supports both training programs for scientists and the renowned Computational Science Graduate Fellowship Program, CSGF. OSCAR nurtures all elements of the ecosystem for scientific computing. What about the future? OSCAR has consistently provided leadership to DOE, the nation, and the world by accelerating the development of new computing capabilities that can transform science. When I last appeared before this subcommittee in May of 2013, we testified about the importance of funding the development of exascale computing and the dangers to U.S. leadership in computational science if we fail to move expeditiously. Since that time, the urgency has increased, as has our knowledge of how to proceed. In February 2014, ASCAC reported to DOE on the top 10 exascale research challenges. This report reflected the progress since our earlier 2010 exascale report. In addition to identifying the 10 challenges, our expert panel emphasized both that the U.S. has the technical foundations to address and overcome them, and that it is critical that we do so. In August 2014, the Secretary of Energy Advisory Board Task Force on Next Generation Computing, of which I was a participant, made public in its draft report, which included the recommendation that DOE move forward with next generation computing at the exascale level. The report also endorsed continued use of the co-design process and of government, industry, academic partnering mechanisms. OSCAR, in collaboration with the National Nuclear Security Administration, has developed a preliminary plan for such an exascale computing initiative. This plan was provided to ASCAC for review last November. This review is actively in process with the resulting report due in September 2015 and an interim report at the end of March. I think it's more important than ever for the U.S. to maintain and extend its leadership in scientific computing. I hope that our presence here today will help to that end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Giles. And Mr. Turk, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Morning, Chairman Weber, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the Office of Science OSCAR program, Supercomputing and American Technology Leadership. I've been involved in many of IBM's activities in supercomputing over the last 25 years. During that time, I've worked closely on supercomputing projects with both the Office of Science and NNSA, such as ASCII white, blue, and purple systems at Lawrence Livermore, the Blue Gene Systems Mirror and Sequoia at Argonne and Livermore, respectively, the Roadrunner system at Los Alamos, and as well as key software projects at Pacific Northwest National Lab. I've witnessed firsthand the magnitude of innovation possible courtesy of the collaboration between private industry and the national labs. I'd like to pose today 3 questions with respect to the linkage between supercomputing and technological leadership. First, why be concerned about supercomputing leadership? The Council on Competitiveness has stated that to outcompete, you must outcompute. I believe this to be true. Supercomputers, as the other panelists have said, are tools for insight and strategic advantage with broad and diverse application in areas such as oil discovery, fraud detection, efficient automobile and aerospace design, and even many areas of basic science. It's nearly axiomatic that better supercomputers give one a chance for more insight and greater advantage than those with lesser supercomputers. That's why you see the Europeans, the Chinese, the Japanese, and others making a concerted push through public funding of major supercomputer projects. They want to outcompete us. But there's a fundamental understanding we must also have. Supercomputers are nothing without the software programs and applications that run on them. And software engineers only want to produce software for the best machine, not the second, third, or fourth best. Without the best supercomputers available in the U.S., software developers will migrate to develop their innovations elsewhere. Once that trend starts, it's very hard to stop or reverse. It's much more costly to catch up than it is to stay ahead. Second question is, what technology problems are in the way of maintaining leadership? The first problem is the need to make supercomputers more energy efficient. The fastest Western economy-based supercomputers in the world today consume about 10 megawatts of energy, or $10 million a year. As supercomputers get bigger and more powerful, without some real breakthroughs, by the beginning of the next decade, the energy bill could easily be 100 megawatts or $100 million to run. This means the cost of energy will begin to overtake the cost of the computer itself, and becoming a limiting factor on supercomputer usage. A slowdown in usage will ultimately correlate with a slowdown in innovation and impact economic competitiveness. The second problem is how to handle huge amounts of data. It's clear that the explosive growth of data is challenging some of the fundamental design principles of supercomputers. For example, 500 ebooks is about 1 billion bytes of data. With today's technology, that amount of data can be moved through a computer network in a matter of minutes or less. But suppose we multiply that amount of data by 1 million. That would represent the amount of data many supercomputers are working on today. And in short order, there will be problems 1,000 times beyond that. Old design principles don't solve this problem. We cannot simply do what we did in the past at greater scale to fix this. The temptation, therefore, would be to ignore portions of data to make the problem more tractable. But data left unanalyzed is insight undiscovered. So we have to find ways to make future supercomputers more accommodating to the vast amounts of data they'll be asked to explore. New innovations are required: networking, memory design, storage innovation, and data management software to remedy this circumstance. The third problem is application software. Most application software running on supercomputers today are based on mathematical approaches more than 40 years old, which is the last time there was a major systematic government investment in new algorithms. The software is now horribly mismatched to modern supercomputers simply because 40 years ago no one could have guessed what today's supercomputers would look like. Access to modern software and new algorithms will have a dramatic impact on the utility of modern supercomputers. There must be a plan to modernize application software. There's no silver bullet to solve these problems. Invention is required to maximize impact. All the problems must be addressed in concert. The third question is, what needs to happen to maintain leadership? From my experience, collaboration with the national labs has been a proven means to stimulate innovation in supercomputers. The labs work on problems of such complexity they always stretch the limits of computing technology. In fact, a crude rule of thumb is the computing requirements of the national labs are about 5 to 7 years advanced over the rest of the market. Funding the Oscar program will present the opportunity to address the problems I've described and contribute to maintain the pace of innovation and competitiveness demands. If this commitment is made, U.S. leadership in supercomputing should be preserved for years to come. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Turek. And now, Dr. Crowley, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Weber, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. As noted in my introduction, I'm Executive Director of the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, or SIAM. SIAM comprises over 14,000 members who work in industry, government and national labs, and in academia. They represent over 500 universities, corporations, and research organizations from around the world. SIAM is dedicated to solving real-world problems through applied mathematics and computational science. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify and for highlighting the critical work of the Department of Energy's Office of Science and its Advanced Scientific Computing Research Program. SIAM greatly appreciates your committee's continued leadership on and the recognition of the critical roles of the Office of Science and Oscar in enabling a strong U.S. economy, workforce, and society through mathematical, scientific, and engineering research relevant to the DOE mission. The Office of Science supports basic research to address pressing challenges in energy, computing, physical sciences, and biology. And this support has been critical to the applied mathematics and computational science community. I wish to focus on 3 topics: Oscar's support for mathematical and computational science research, the potential benefits of exascale and the technological challenges to reach it, and finally, workforce and training needs. First, the role of Oscar in supporting key mathematical and computational research. Oscar supports the development of new modeling, simulation, and data tools to help researchers solve scientific and energy challenges. Modern life as we know it, from search engines like Google to the design of modern aircraft, would not be possible without the unique contributions of mathematicians and computational scientists. Likewise, DOE depends on mathematical and computational techniques to make predictions, model and simulate systems that would be costly or impossible to experiment on, and manage and make sense of ever-growing data that is produced by scientific experiments, such as DOE's particle accelerators and light source facilities. The nation faces critical challenges in energy efficiency, renewable energy, future energy sources, and environmental impacts of energy production and use. These challenges all involve complex systems, such as the power grid or the U.S. nuclear stockpile. Mathematical and computational tools help us model and understand these systems, design new solutions to problems, and predict the impact of new technologies. OSCAR programs not only support new mathematical tools, but also develop software so that DOE, industry, and the academic community can use these tools. And I note that the PETSI team at Argonne just was awarded the ACM SIAM Prize in computational science and engineering, and that it shows the power of the people working at DOE. Second, I'd like to address the possibilities and challenges of exascale. For all the advances that OSCAR has already enabled, today there are still challenges that are too complex for current computers to model. Exascale computing has the potential to spur revolutionary advances in modeling and simulation, expand our capacity to analyze complex systems in great detail, and capturing more complexity with better predictive abilities than ever before. I will note that the investments in modeling, algorithm research, and software development are essential to realizing the full benefits of exascale computers so that we can use these machines to solve pressing scientific and energy challenges. It's not just the hardware, the computer science and the math are essential. Finally, I'd like to discuss an important workforce development program within OSCAR. Researchers trained to use high-performance computers to solve key scientific challenges are central to DOE's mission. The Computational Sciences Graduate Fellowship Program is a critical program that maintains the pipeline of this workforce by supporting the training of new scientists and engineers with strong computational research experience and close ongoing ties to DOE and the national labs. The CSGF has a long history of success at DOE, and SIAM strongly supports its continuation. I thank you again for the opportunity to provide this testimony today, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I've provided additional details in my written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the witnesses for their testimony. Members are reminded that the committee rules limit questioning to 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Good grief, where do we start? Y'all have just raised a whole bunch of questions. Dr. Crowley, can you provide an overview in plain English so our constituents can understand? You kind of went through it there toward the end of what OSCAR program does, but why is it important to the U.S. economy?
The tools that are provided for modeling and simulation are used across. I gave you the example of the award, the prize that went to the PETSI team at Argonne National Lab. PETSI stands for, well, it's an acronym that stands for, basically it's a team that has developed computational tools for high-performance computers. These tools are used by industry that do modeling and simulation for advancing materials, some of the things that Roscoe Giles mentioned. And without these tools, one can't use the computers efficiently to do that. And so it's the research in not only developing the tools so that people can use the computers, but also the models that run on them. I mean, to take an example that's not necessarily a DOE model, but just looking at the one that came home to me recently because of the weather prediction in Philadelphia that almost kept me from coming here. This latest snowstorm missed Philadelphia, but it was predicted to dump more than a foot of snow on us. Improved modeling, better tools, and higher performance computing would have made that ability to make those predictions much better. And that same thing applies for any other kind of thing that's modeled across science and engineering. That with better tools for modeling, better computational tools, we can advance our ability to produce better materials, to simulate anything that we need, and understand better scientific things in fusion or any other area.
Okay, I think it was you that said that the algorithms or the math that was used 40 years ago, it was Mr. Turek, so this question is probably for you, that couldn't predict or you couldn't see what computers look like today. What did you say about that?
Yeah, what I meant by that was that at that time frame, the nature of what was considered to be a supercomputer bears no resemblance to the kinds of computers that exist today. So people designed the algorithms and the corresponding software to map to that kind of computer. Those approaches don't translate well over 4 decades to the kinds of things we're doing today.
So here's my question. do we have the capability today to look out 40 years in the future and predict how effective those algorithms will be, or will there be new techniques? Are we able to, with the advanced computing today, are we able to look out 40 years in the future?
Nobody can look out 40 years correctly. However, what I would say is that we know that many of the algorithms and the software implementations today are obsolete for what we're trying to do. The way to characterize it would be the following. Today's modern supercomputers typically use order of millions of microprocessors. Many of the algorithms and the software implemented only scale to maybe a handful of hundred of microprocessors. Not because it can't be done, it's because it's a byproduct of the fact that that invention is 40 years old. A reinvestment in algorithmic development, the fundamental mathematics and the associated software has been demonstrably proven in places like Argonne, Lawrence Livermore, and Oak Ridge that these approaches to common problems can be modified to accommodate this nature of supercomputing we have today. It would have a material effect on dramatically improving the insight that people gain from the application of the supercomputing tool.
Is part of the aim of OSCAR, for example, because we hear a lot in today's society about hacking, and so we invest the money, and I'm a great believer that we need to be on the cutting edge because it helps with national security, for example. But are we at risk with supercomputing of investing money, time, and resources, and then having that technology stolen from us by other countries rather?
So there is this notion of internationalism, if you will, but I would characterize it this way. The Chinese program is very parochial to China. The European program is very parochial to Europe, and they're making investments that are very much wedded to the parochial interests of companies and institutions in those geographies. There is always the chance that through regular commerce or more nefarious means, technology can escape geographic boundaries. But I think the deployment of technology in the economy is what really makes a difference. So the more supercomputing that can be made available, the more and diverse kinds of people who can get access to it and use it is what really spurs the economic kind of innovation we've all alluded to here today.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I am out of time. So the chair will now recognize Ranking Member Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm so delighted we have such able witnesses today, and I know that this hearing is focused on our investments in superconducting research, supercomputing research in particular. But I'd like to take advantage of your presence, Mr. Augustine, to ask a few broad questions to help us guide our future and how we are able to continue research. Whether or not we are producing the researchers. In 2005, the National Academy's Gathering Storm panel, which you chaired, recommended increasing science agency budgets by 10% annually. The 2007 Competes bill, which was very graciously accepted and supported by President Bush, had bipartisan support for a positive growth trajectory of R&D, and unfortunately appropriations the last 8 years has not come close to keeping up with what was projected. It was changed to a more conservative recommendation to at least 4% annually in 2014. In the current budgetary and political environment, how would you continue to make the case for increased funding for R&D to politicians across the political spectrum? And what do you believe are the consequences if we do not even achieve this modest 4% annual growth target for federal investment in basic research and development? And finally, do you believe that a robust reorganization of America Competes should be a top priority for this committee this year?
Mr. Augustine, turn your mic on, please.
I thought it was on.
Oh, there
I'm
you
sorry. To deal with the last part of your question first, I think America Competes is perhaps the most important thing that this committee could take on. It drew more attention to the problems we face in this area and took further steps to improving the situation than anything else I'm aware of that we've done. So I strongly urge that. With regard to the status of research and where we've come since the various reports that you allude to, the bad news is that we're declining in our investment in research as a percent of GDP. Other countries are growing. Even at NIH, which is research there is strongly favored by the American public, we've seen a 22% cut in the last decade in real dollars, and it's continuing to decline. This, of course, discourages young people from going into research, and basically it means that we're going to have a lower quality of life. Impact on our health will be very real, and the economy today is so heavily dependent on technology that without doubt we will be hurt economically seriously. I would cite an example from my own field of the impact of research, and particularly high-performance computing. I'm an aerodynamicist, design airplanes, among other things. The way we used to design airplanes when I was early in my career was build giant wind tunnels. We built them, they were plugged into the Tennessee Valley Authority by and large, because that's the only place we could get enough power. We ran them at night, so we didn't shut down the lights in the southern part of the country. Today, we don't use wind tunnels. We put the airplane in a high-performance computer, if you will, use a mathematical model, and within a nanosecond have the answers that we were searching. Just one example of the enormous impact that investment in technology can have, and also the negative impact of not investing in science, research, and technology.
Well, thank you very much. The National Research Council report entitled Rising to the Challenge, a U.S. Innovation Policy for the Global Economy, states the assumption that the output of the U.S. innovation process will be captured by U.S.-based industry has been rendered obsolete by globalization. And that knowledge created through federally funded research at universities and national laboratories can be commercialized and industrialized virtually anywhere. The report goes on to say that a more comprehensive innovation policy is needed to anchor new and existing companies here in the United States. The American Academy of Arts and Sciences panel that you recently chaired addressed some of this issue in a report released this fall. What recommendations do you have for what federal policies are necessary to ensure that U.S. companies benefit from U.S. innovation?
Well, thank you for that question. And as you point out, research is a global commodity or global asset. And it raises the question, why not just let others do the research and then apply their research? The answer, I would cite Craig Barrett, who ran Intel some years ago. Craig says that on the last day of any calendar year, 90% of the revenues that Intel receives are for products that didn't exist on the first day of the calendar year. And so the only answer to your question that I can see is that we just have to be faster than others at applying the results of research. We've got to be fast. And your question, what do we do about it? And the answer is remove every bureaucratic obstacle, every obstacle we can think of, particularly a technology transfer from the labs, that causes time delay, because time is everything.
Thank you very much. My time is expired. Thank you.
Thank you. And the chair now recognizes the vice chairman of this committee, Congressman Newhouse.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and appreciate you gentlemen being here this morning and talking about this very important subject, certainly enlightening me as to the nature of our responsibility here. not to let you dominate the program this morning, Mr. Augustine, but a question that arose in my mind after reading through your testimony, that a lot of the body of research at our national laboratories is maybe not being utilized as much as it could be, so to speak, not to put words in your mouth, but there are certain obstacles that stand in the way of getting that research to industries. So could you talk a little bit about maybe what you see as solutions to that issue that we have? Is it communication and some of the conflict of interest issues that you mentioned and those kinds of things?
Well, thank you, Congressman Newhouse, for that question. And I do believe that the nation doesn't begin to benefit from the asset that our national labs represents. It certainly benefits importantly, but it could be so much more. And the reason for that is that we need to do a better job of getting knowledge out of the laboratories into industry so that we can commercialize and distribute the results. And as to impediments, there are many. One that certainly stands in my mind is that firms simply don't know what's going on in the national laboratories. They tend to be rather isolated, and we could do a much better job of letting people in industry know what's happening at the laboratories. Secondly, the best way to transfer technology that I've ever been able to find is by transferring people. You move the knowledge that's in their minds. And today, well-meaning conflict of interest laws make it very difficult to transfer people among industry, government, and academia. In my career, I had the opportunity to put in 2 tours in government, and today I doubt that I could do that under the conflict of interest laws that exist. A third one that I would cite is that we're very concerned, properly so, about favoring one firm over another. What do we do about it without taking a great deal of time? One is for the labs to do a better job of letting the world know what they're working on, the industrial world, if you will. Other things are cited in H.R. 5120, for example, giving the labs more latitude to create industry partnerships, give the labs more latitude to negotiate technology transfer agreements. These are a few of the things that could be done, but I don't have answers to the conflict of interest one, because obviously we don't want conflicts of interest. On the other hand, the inability to move people and to move ideas in and out of the labs is a huge burden on our country.
No, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Quickly, a question then perhaps for Mr. Turek and perhaps Dr. Giles as well. My limited understanding is that the largest supercomputers are rarely able to operate at full capacity due to their complexity. Some components almost always in need of attention or repair. If that's a true statement, could you tell me what's being done to improve the reliability of these systems, and are we devoting enough resources to this aspect of advancement?
I'll take the first shot at that. We're doing a lot for that. A lot of that is actually handled by software, so soft recoveries of problems. What you see with supercomputing are problems of scale. If you have 1 million parts of anything, the likelihood is you're going to see something failing pretty regularly, even if it's integrated circuits. It's a problem that's been understood for quite some time, and principally it's handled by software techniques to overcome it. So in the vast majority of cases, you actually can get to full capacity if you have the software capability on the application level to utilize it. That's the bigger impediment right now. Again, most people who gain access to commercial software are gaining access to software that is archaically designed relative to the scale of the kinds of computers being built today, and that's a limiting factor.
Okay. Can I add something?
Absolutely, Dr. Jones.
I think that also our sense of what the capacity of a system is reflects some of the archaic history in the sense that we often measure or think of the capacity as how much data can you sort of transform from one form to another, which is an artifact of the time when the critical component of a computer was the processor that made that transformation. Now we're looking at systems with millions of processors, and redundancy in processors is not a negative, to have multiple processors comparing results one to another. So as Mr. Turek said, there are lots of opportunities for new ways of ensuring the reliability of the final answers we get. And if we get discouraged about thinking about that problem, I would remind us all that our brains, with millions and millions and billions of neurons and interconnections, have faults on the neuron level all the time, and they don't materially affect the ultimate outcome. And I think we're in the process of building computers that can function more like that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And the chair now recognizes Congressman Hultgren from Illinois for 5 minutes.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Chairman. I especially want to thank the Chairman for working out a way for Dr. Giles to be with us remotely. I'm very fortunate to represent Fermilab, and I have Argonne right down the road from me. Because of this, I have been able to see the fruits that grow out of our nation's commitment to basic, curiosity-driven scientific research. The impacts of this research, I believe, are limitless. Just as we didn't go to the moon to invent Velcro, we didn't build particle colliders so that we could invent the magnet for our MRI machines. This topic, supercomputing, is close to home for me because physics is where big data began. Besides the maintenance of our nuclear stockpile, it's either astrophysics or high-energy physics that's driving the research necessary to build the most sophisticated computer networks we have today. Because of this, it was largely DOE that began the Genome Project before NIH realized it was a feasible endeavor. As interested as I am in technology transfer and local economic development, if our research enterprise is focused on the short-term photo op and press release style research, which it appears the administration is more prone to advance, we will lose out on the long-term benefits we all say we should be focused on. If we're going to stay at the forefront of technology, our technological development, we must reaffirm our commitment to basic scientific research. Dr. Giles, in our previous hearing, you had a chance to review a draft copy of my legislation, which in the 113th House eventually passed, H.R. 2495, the American Supercomputing Leadership Act. My bill called for a lab-industry-university partnership to develop 2 different exascale machines. I wondered if you'd be willing to describe what industry's role should be in such a partnership, and then describe the benefits of having a university as part of this partnership.
Yes, I'd be happy to address that and some of the written get to that point. I think that Oscar's work has helped to start a virtuous cycle with industry, academia, and the labs in developing and looking forward to the path for exascale, so that in collaboration with industry, we are able to have government funds help to stimulate research and investigation in areas that are important for building the next generation scale of computer before that is actually competitive, or something that's in the competitive sphere of the industry. And then industry's impact is to help define what is sufficiently along the lines of work that they can build and build on into something that they would be interested in from their perspective, that we find an accommodation. In the co-design methodology that I mentioned represents the pattern of developing new software and algorithms as in the context of hardware that's evolving, and to help use those needs from the scientific community, from the universities and the labs to help define what kind of hardware makes sense. So that this goes back to the idea of building an ecosystem that supports rapid advances in scientific computing that links together all those elements. I think, and I do want to thank you so much for the legislation you proposed that we discussed last time, and which made it out of the House as I understand it, but not fully to the end of the process. I think it's a really important step that we explicitly fund the development of that next generation set of systems.
Thanks, Dr. Giles. Quickly, Mr. Augustine, I would first like to thank you for all of your work. You have been a leader in this and in so many other spaces. It's amazing. Thank you. I had the pleasure of sitting down with your colleague, Dr. Neil Lane, to discuss local economic development potential for the national labs in reference to the Restoring the Foundation report. Many of the recommendations from this discussion echoed my previous past legislation, the DOE Labs Modernization and Technology Transfer Act, which the Bipartisan Policy Center listed in their doable items, which there aren't too many of, for the 14th Congress. Wondered if you could make a comment more generally on this bill and the needs and benefits for making the labs more nimble and open to the public.
Well, yes, one of the things that certainly relates to what you raise is that the labs are able to build major facilities that individual firms can't afford to build. Fermilab is a classic example. And if they're not available to the public or the industry by and large, then we don't begin to get the value from them that we could get. Some of the legislation that you describe takes important steps in this regard. I guess I would say, in terms of a broad answer, and I realize that we're running out of your time, that the bad news is that we spend, as I said, 0.1% of the GDP on research. The good news is you could double that and only have to allocate 0.1% of the GDP. And so the opportunity is probably there to make major changes. And I go back to one of the studies that you referred to. We discovered that we spend more on potato chips in this country than we spend on research on clean energy. That just doesn't make sense.
Well, again, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Chairman. And real quick, just thank you, Dr. Crowley, too, for the shout-out to Argonne and recent recognition there. That's fantastic. So thank you so much, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Mr. Massey from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is really for anybody up there that cares to comment, but it seemed like 20 years ago there was the apocryphal prediction that we would run out of available computing power with silicon, yet here we are still on silicon. What is the next step after silicon? And since we didn't run out of power with silicon, how much further can we go on silicon? Mr. Turek, it looks like you're interested in answering that.
I'll take the first shot at least. We are at an apocryphal time. And to a certain extent, you could characterize the industry as putting a Band-Aid over this problem. So the limitations of silicon are embedded in physics, and we are at those limits today. I think the last time I saw an advertisement on TV about buy a computer because the processor is faster was January 2001. You don't have a 10 gigahertz processor. You're never going to see one either because the physics are limiting. So instead what the industry has done is it's spewed out massive amounts of cores, lower power compute elements that are ganged together to work in concert on the problems at hand. The problem is you don't get a linear scalability of the compute effect. So in other words, if I have 4 cores, I don't get 4 times the compute capability of 1 core. Maybe I get 2.5. And as I scale up to 1 million, I'm not getting 1 million times, I'm getting something far less than that. So we're band-aiding our way through this limitation at the physics level. There are more materials and so on that are coming forth, and whether it's carbon nanotubes or something else, but physics is a limiting factor here. The way you deal with this ultimately is you look at the architecture of how these systems are put together and the composite set of technologies that let you deal with a problem. Advances in networking technology, memory systems, all these things need to be looked at in total to begin to push the ball forward. But it's a real slog now. Believe me, in 1996, I knew how to build a Roadrunner system, not a problem. It was just a matter of hard work. That was the first petascale system on the planet. In 2005, I didn't know how to get to exascale, and it's still a struggle today. We're up against real limits.
So does anybody else care to talk about that?
Yes, just to add one quick observation. The Secretary of Energy Advisory Board Task Force considered very seriously this question about the relationship of what we're doing now to the further future. And one of the things that became very clear is that because the limitations and the possibilities and opportunities are physics-based, and the DOE labs are the premier research set of facilities for the physical sciences, that in some ways DOE, with its computing interest and capability and the labs, is in an excellent position to do the research needed to move beyond silicon and CMOS and what we're doing now to the next generation, whether that involves, as David said, superconducting technology, or quantum technology. The labs are in a really good position to investigate.
That was going to be my next question. So obviously we have already hit the physical limits of silicon and the speed of light and energy density and all that stuff. But and we've band-aided that with architecture, or maybe that's the way around it, but we have diminishing returns to putting more cores in there. What are the next promising platforms, and what role will our research that we're paying for here in Congress play? What's the next transistor? What's going to be the next paradigm shift? And what role does our research play in that?
Well, I'll make a brief comment. There is no silver bullet. There is nothing I can point to that says the problems of the future are done. We can simply move along as systematically as we have over the last 50 years or so. When I talk about architecture, I mean different approaches to solve the problem. Today, one of the techniques that's being explored and reflected in the Coral program at the DOE is the employment of accelerators, specialized processors attached to conventional processors to give an overall speed up in compute capability. We pioneered this, by the way, with the cell processor at Los Alamos 10 years ago, which was an accelerator-based kind of technology. That's a new idea. Accelerators have been thought of over many years, but never gained acceptance because we could leverage the evolution of silicon to overcome the limits. No longer possible. Now there's an embrace of accelerators. So you see a lot of different kinds of accelerators come into play and applied in very unique and interesting kinds of ways.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to see what the next breakthrough is. I realize there's no silver bullet and we got to use a shotgun, but I trust that we'll come up with something. Thank you.
Thank you, and I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from the members. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Giles. The witnesses are excused, and the hearing is adjourned.